Good day, everyone. I'm back for another lecture. In this lecture, I will be discussing to you the topic Research Methodology for Quantitative Design. So, in the previous lecture, uh, we have discussed research methodology for qualitative design. This time, we'll focus on quantitative design, which is the focus of the course, diba? Your final output will be we will be using quantitative design. So listen carefully and please take down notes. Now that you already know the basic concepts, principles in the process of research, as well as the processes of problem conceptualization and literature review, it is vital to proceed to the understanding and practice of the research methodology. Diba? After research conceptualization, research title formulation, problem conceptualization, literature review. Now we will proceed to the next part of the research writing, that is um, establishing or emphasizing the research methodology. How are we going to conduct the study? Before you will be able to know what methods to be used in a particular research, it is important to know if your research design is quantitative or qualitative, diba? Quantitative or qualitative. So before doing anything else, emphasize whether what design are you going to conduct, quantitative or qualitative. As what I've mentioned, so this course will be focusing on quantitative research. Now, this chapter includes the research design, the sampling design, methods of data collection, measurement, and instrument development, and data analysis for the quantitative research design. Learning objectives. At the end of this lecture, you are expected to learn the following: to define the basic concept of research design for quantitative research, determine the appropriate study design, sampling design, and data analysis for your quantitative research study, and choose an appropriate design for your quantitative research. Now, we will be comparing quantitative design versus qualitative design. What are the similarities and what are the differences? And the main basis for the differentiation is the type of data being sought. Si quanti and si quali, they are different as to the type of data being sought, research aim, researcher's knowledge of the phenomenon, use of the research, data gathering, research participants, tools, and analysis. Now, a methodology and method. Go back to the differences. So, si quanti and si quali, they differ as to the following, di ba? Basis. As to type of data, si quantitative, it will be gathering statistical, or it will be using numerical data, di ba? Numerical equivalent or statistical equivalent. Whereas si quali, descriptive data, more on description. As to research aim, um, nakadepende siya sa research, but the research design also differ. Like for example, sa quanti, the aim is to know the relationship. So we'll be applying correlational statistics. Whereas sa qualitative research, more on description in order to achieve in order to meet the researcher's research objective. Researchers' knowledge of the phenomenon. It is expected that in in qualitative research, the researcher has no further knowledge, diba, about the phenomenon under or being studied. Whereas in quanti, the researcher has already seen the gap. They have already the researcher already know what can know the possible, diba, the possible answer or the possible, or there's hypothesis, diba, in quantitative research, wherein the researcher already know the possible answer to various questions. Use of the research, lahi-lahi sila og use. Aso data gathering, di ba? They differ aso data gathering, lahi-lahi og methodology. Participants, di ba? Kinahanglan sa quanti, not too small, not too large number of sample size or participants. But sa quali, okay rang gamay, okay pud nga daghan. Also, they differ as to tools and analysis. Okay, this time class, we will be differentiating methodology and method. So, unsay kalahian nila? What is a methodology? Chapter 3 is all about methodology. Now, methodology refers to the overall approaches and perspectives to the whole process of research and aims to discuss main issues for a proposal. Say methodology, nakafocus siya sa overall process, diba? The whole process of doing the research. Methodology. Methodology aims to discuss main issues such as why will you collect certain data? What data will you collect? Where will you collect? Those are questions, di ba? Wanted to answer or to discuss through methodology. How will you collect it and how will you analyze it? When we talk of research methodology, we do not talk of the research methods, but we also consider the logic behind the methods we use in the context of our research study. It is a way of thinking about and studying social phenomena, according to Corbin and Strauss, 2015, and how the methods to be used in our study are put in a specific and appropriate context. We also explain why we are using a particular method or technique and why we are not using others so that research results are capable of being evaluated either by the researcher himself or by others, according to Collis, you say 2003. On the other hand, research method refers to only to the various specific tools or ways data can be collected and analyzed. Methodology, it talks about the whole process or the overall process of conducting the research, which composed of research methods, di ba? Pag research method, it is specific, di ba? It refers to specific tools or specific ways of collecting and analyzing the data. Research method is through questionnaire, interview checklist, data analysis, software. So methodology, it talks about the whole process of doing the research. Why will you collect data? What data are you going to collect? How are you going to collect it? So those are questions for under or to be addressed by methodology, di ba? Chapter 3. So inyong chapter 3 sa inyong research paper, na dito tanan, di ba? Ng research design, locale, respondents, and then sampling design, gyud sa inyo pagkuan, gyud sa inyo pag-distribute ang instrument and many more. And research method refers to specific tools or ways data can be collected and analyzed. Diba? Specific tools you are going to use in collecting and analyzing data. Example is questionnaire. Diba? It is a research method, interview checklists, data analysis software, etc. In other words, all those methods used by the researcher during the course of studying a specific research problem are generally termed as research methods. In other words, all those methods used by the researcher are said to be research methods. When these tools, techniques are contextualized towards the attainment of the objectives of a particular study that you are conducting, then we are referring to methodology. So sa kalahian, if you are referring to the tools during the course of studying, diba, the methods being used, that refers to research methods. When you say methodology, when these tools, techniques are contextualized towards attainment of the objectives of the study, then you are the study you're conducting, then we are referring to the methodology. In short, methodology is composed of various research methods, tools, techniques in realizing or attaining the objectives of a particular study. Okay, next is research design. What do you mean by research design? The type of research that you have chosen in your particular fields of study will determine the design of your research or of your study. The design will then indicate your data gathering procedures or data acquisition, sampling design and selection procedures, and statistical treatment and interpretation of findings. All depends in your research design. So, unsa ning research design? You have two, diba? You're going to know whether it's quanti or qualitative research design, correlational ba siya, experimental ba siya, and many more. So the design will indicate, diba, how the data will be gathered, how data will be acquired, what will be the sampling design, what will be the sampling procedure, selection procedure, and what are the statistical treatment or tools to be used. Now, that was research design. A study design is the process that guides researchers on how to collect, analyze, and interpret observation. That is a study design. What is the difference between research design and study design? When you say research design, it all emphasize the different methods to be no no what will that it all emphasize the the way of gathering data, the way of access, all methods of conducting the research. So, and then it will be the basis whether um you will be doing sampling design like this or sampling design like this. So nakadepende sa mong research design. So duhara nakadepende, it's quantitative or qualitative. So quantitative inani, kung qualitative inani. Now, the research design has a study design. The study design refers to the process that guides the researchers on how to collect, analyze, and interpret observations. A study design, it is a process that guides you researchers on how are you going to collect the data, how are you going to analyze and interpret the observations. Now, in quantitative research, there are two types of study design. In quantitative research, there's two types of study design: observational type and experimental type. Take note, there are two types of research design, quanti and quali. Si quali na siya research study design, o si quanti na study design. Now, in quantitative research will be the focus of the course. There are two types of study design. It's either observational and experimental. When you say observational, if the sample population is observed for various characteristics, this is sometimes called non-intervention study or non-experimental study, where the researcher only observes and analyzes what does not intervene. So it unlike experimental, wherein um, unlike experimental, so observational type is that the researcher will just observe and analyze later the out from his observation of a given topic or a given research study. Whereas sa experimental type, if factors other than those under consideration can be controlled. So the experimental is more on focus on controlled variables. This is also known as intervention study, wherein the researcher manipulates objects or situations and measure the outcome of these manipulations. Now, observational types of study can be classified based on the scope of the study. Cross-sectional study, cohort study. And when you say cross-sectional studies, it involves the analysis of data collected from a population or a representative subset and a specific point in time, representing a cross-sectional data. An example of this study conducted by Eggert and Helm 2003, entitled Exploring the Impact of Relationship Transparency on Business Relationship, a cross-sectional study among purchasing managers in Germany. So, si cross-sectional analysis of data collected from a population or representative subset. So cohort, it collects data over a long period of time, unlike cross-sectional studies. A cohort, it takes a long period of time and it measures each variable over two or more distinct time periods. This is also known as longitudinal study. From the term longitudinal, it requires a longer period of time, involving a group of people who share a common characteristics or experience within a defined period. Example of cohort study. An example of a cohort study is age cohort analysis in adoption of mobile data services, Gensers versus Baby Boomers by Yang and Jolly, 2008. Now, experimental, tapos na ta we're done with observational. So observational is either cross-sectional or cohort. Si cross-sectional in a short period of time, and then si cohort is a long period of time. Next is experimental types of study can be classified based on the approach to participants. We have true experimental studies and we have also quasi-experimental studies. Through experimental studies, in this kind of study, the participants or subjects are randomly assigned to the treatment conditions, randomly assigned, so levels of independent variable. The only difference is in the group would be due to chance. In this case, the interview validity of the research tends to be high and variable associated with individuals who are not source of constant error. So through experimental studies, participants or subjects are randomly assigned to the treatment conditions, diba? Through experimental. So you will be doing really a true experimental um, study of a particular topic, diba? Like for example, the participants or subjects are randomly assigned to the treatment conditions or levels of independent variable of the topic being studied. The only differences in the groups would be due to chance. In this case, the internal validity of the research tends to be high and for variables associated with individuals are not source of constant error. Okay. One good example of the application of experiment in business is a study of Hogendorn, Osterbeek, Prague 2003, entitled The Impact of Gender Diversity on the Performance of Business Teams, Evidence from a Field Experiment. So it requires field work, diba? Field work, and then come up with evidence. Aside from true experimental studies, we have also quasi-experimental studies. So, si true experimental studies, tinuod siya nga experimental design. Si quasi-experimental, mura siya experimental, but not really a true experimental study. Mura lang siya og experimental study. In this research, the treatment level is determined by conditions beyond the control of the experimenter. Especially the difference of quasi-experimental with true experiment is the absence of random assignment of respondents or subjects to the treatment condition. Example of this kind of research used in entrepreneurship, education, and competencies was done by Sanchez, 2011, entitled University Training for Entrepreneurial Competencies, Its Impact on Intention of Venture Creation. Now, the preparation of the research design appropriate for a particular research involves usually the consideration of the following. So please consider the following. The means of obtaining the operation. How are you going to obtain the information? Especially this time that we are experiencing health crisis. Now, in conducting your research, take note that you have to consider how or what will be the means of obtaining the information. The availability of and skills of the researcher and his or her group mates, if any. So before conducting research, diba, you have to improve your skills, diba, and abilities in writing research paper. That is why what we are doing now is really teaching you how to and teaching you or emphasizing to you the relevant concepts in research, and then how research is to be conducted. Third, explanation of the way in which selected means of obtaining information will be organized and the reasoning leading to the selection. Explanation of the way. Third consideration. Diba? Explanation of the way in which selected means of obtaining information will be organized and the reasoning leading to the selection. The time of available for research and the cost factor relating to research. The cost factor is a problem. The financial resources available for a purpose. That would be all. I will be doing another lecture for sampling frames and how to compute sample size, and then last will be data gathering instrument. Thank you and God bless us all.